The question that quietly haunts many: why does nothing bring me joy anymore? We wonder this as we walk through forests, sit by rivers, or gaze at the stars. And yet, the more we seek it, the more it seems to recede. We think that if only we could possess certain experiences, attain certain accomplishments, or live a certain way, happiness would appear. And yet it does not. Perhaps the first thing to notice is that the question itself is already slightly mistaken. Joy is not a possession, a treasure to be held, nor a prize to be won. And yet most of us approach life as if it were. We imagine that if conditions were right, we would finally feel complete. Perhaps the reason joy seems absent is that it is not a thing to hold, but a movement to be felt. The gentle unfolding of life itself. Why does it feel so absent? Because we grasp. We clutch experiences, achievements, and even the passage of days, hoping that one of them will finally satisfy the longing within. But the harder we grasp, the more it slips away. Imagine holding a handful of water. You form a tight fist, and what remains? Only wet fingers and disappointment. The act of grasping creates resistance. Joy cannot enter a hand that is tightly closed. Consider the river flowing through mountains and valleys. It never struggles, never demands, never seeks to control its path. Yet if a rigid dam is placed across its course, the water cannot move freely. It foams, splashes, lashes against the obstacle, all that energy wasted in struggle. So it is with our desire. We construct mental dams. I must have this. I must feel that. I cannot be happy unless. And in doing so, we block the very flow of life. And it is rather amusing, really, because this grasping is itself part of the illusion. We imagine that joy exists outside of ourselves, something the universe owes us. But joy is never outside. It is always present in the movement of existence. We are not separate from the river, the wind, or the trees. When we grasp, we resist the very flow of which we are a part. Much of our suffering comes not from the world, but from our resistance to it. We resist boredom, sadness, fear, confusion, even our own missteps. And every time we resist, the discomfort grows. Resisting is like trying to stop waves with your hands, a futile, exhausting struggle. Yet we persist, imagining that by fighting life, we can finally gain control and happiness. Notice how we treat other beings. If someone acts contrary to our expectations, irritation arises. Why? Because they violate the mental story we have constructed for life. We forget that they too are rivers, clouds, leaves trembling in the same wind. Life is not obliged to conform to our desires. When we stop demanding, stop resisting, a spaciousness opens. In this space, joy appears, quietly, naturally, not as a prize, but as the inherent rhythm of existence. And here lies another subtle trap, the self. We believe there is an I standing apart, measuring joy, judging each experience. This self imagines itself a manager, inspecting thoughts and feelings as though they were objects to be sorted. And it is amusing because when you look closely, there is no manager. There is only the parade of life itself, the clouds drifting, the river flowing, the leaves trembling, and the self is part of this movement, not separate. When we insist that I must feel happy or content, we divide ourselves, the self that judges and the self that seeks approval. In this division, joy becomes impossible. The self becomes a hall of mirrors, endlessly reflecting, endlessly dissatisfied. True joy arises not from approval, but from recognition. Recognition that life is not happening to you, but as you. You are not an isolated entity awaiting happiness. You are the river, the wind, the trees, participating in the unfolding of existence. In that recognition, rigid walls of expectation dissolve. The river flows, the clouds drift, and you realize that you have always been part of the dance. Think of a tree. A tree does not strain to grow. It does not fret over whether it is tall enough, strong enough, or worthy enough. It grows because that is its nature. Its roots reach into the soil. Its branches stretch toward the sun. And it flourishes when it is allowed to be itself. Joy is no different. It does not appear when one is perfect, nor when one has done everything right. It arises naturally when the mind ceases interference, when the heart releases its demands, when life is allowed to move unhindered. Consider the absurdity of trying to manufacture joy. One might try to chase adventures, seek pleasures, or alter one's circumstances, hoping happiness will magically appear. And sometimes, for a fleeting moment, it does. But then old resistance returns, old grasping, old arguments with reality. This is because joy is not the product of effort. It is the awareness that effort is not necessary. We resist ourselves, and in resisting, we resist the world. For many, nothing brings pleasure because the mind is engaged in a perpetual argument. I should feel this, I should not feel that. Life should be different. Others should behave as I expect. And in this endless protest, the river becomes turbulent. The clouds thicken. The trees no longer sway freely. And we wonder why life seems empty. So what can be done? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. Begin with observation. Notice boredom, sadness, anger, longing, without judgment. Watch them as clouds drifting across the sky, as waves rising and falling in the ocean. You do not demand the clouds justify themselves. You do not scold the waves for rising. You simply watch. Acceptance is not resignation. It is not passivity. It is simply the acknowledgement that resistance itself generates suffering. By stepping aside, by ceasing to argue with life, by letting go of expectation, one creates space. In that space, joy arises, not as a reward, not as a destination, not as a prize, but as the natural rhythm of being when the mind rests. Compassion emerges. Curiosity arises. Humor appears in the simplest moments. Even the smallest pleasures, a bird, the warmth of sunlight, the whisper of wind, regain their brilliance. So, why does nothing bring you joy? Perhaps because you have been searching in the wrong way, treating life as a problem to be solved rather than a dance to be experienced. Joy is not something to capture. It is something to participate in. It is the trembling leaves, the flowing river, the drifting clouds, the fleeting thought, the laughter that comes unbidden. It is the recognition that life is not happening to you, but as you. Stop striving. Stop demanding. Stop resisting. Notice the river, the clouds, the dance. And perhaps in that quiet attention, you will discover that joy was never lost. It has always been here, patiently waiting for you to stop arguing with what already is. And in that discovery, perhaps you will laugh, because you were never missing anything. You were only arguing with the flow.